My friends, there is a mayor in the city of Boston, the city of Paul Revere, of the Sons of Liberty, of the original Tea Party, who is out there right now, today, in the year of our Lord 2026, hunting down private property owners. Hunting them down, not drug dealers, not gang members, not the people who blew up the marathon finish line, property owners, business owners, tax-paying Americans. Because they had the audacity, the sheer nerve to lease a parking lot to federal immigration authorities. The Department of Homeland Security is calling it unhinged. And folks, that might be the most restrained word they could have chosen. And on top of that, we've got a Senate candidate in the great state of Michigan who thinks Sharia law is basically the same thing as Catholic canon law, who thinks we owe reparations, who thinks your 12-year-old should be able to get a sex change, and that's just healthcare freedom, and who has a museum in his backyard, a Smithsonian-affiliated museum, your tax dollars, folks, putting America's response to September 11th on trial. And the drive-by media, they are thrilled with this guy. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is about to do something that has literally never been done before in this country. Revoke the visas of up to 200,000 people, the largest mass visa revocation in the history of the United States. And you will not hear a peep about it on CNN. The Communist News Network will be too busy covering a homeless woman who trespassed at Mar-a-Lago again. I'm Rick LeBeau. This is Rush Hour, and we are just getting started. Now, I want to talk about this Boston situation because it is a perfect, crystalline, gift-wrapped example of exactly what the left has become. They will obstruct federal law enforcement with every tool at their disposal, every lever, every pressure campaign, every backroom threat, and then they will look you dead in the eye and tell you they believe in the rule of law. The mayor of Boston. Now, I don't have a nickname for this woman yet, but give me a moment. She has apparently been going around, and I mean physically going around, to property owners in and around Boston, pressuring them, leaning on them, telling them not to rent parking facilities to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, to ICE. Federal agents who are doing their jobs, enforcing laws that Congress passed, that presidents signed, that courts have upheld. And the Department of Homeland Security came out and called it, quote, hunting them down. That's the government's word, not mine. Hunting them down. Now, let me ask you something. If a conservative mayor, anywhere, pick a city, if a conservative mayor went around personally pressuring businesses not to do business with, let's say, a Planned Parenthood contractor, what would happen? We'd have wall-to-wall coverage for 3 weeks. There'd be congressional hearings. There'd be editorials in every major paper from here to San Francisco. Dangerous abuse of power, chilling effect on civil liberties, the whole 9 yards. But when it's ICE, when it's federal immigration enforcement, suddenly it's mobile. Suddenly it's heroic. Suddenly the left discovers its love for the little guy being, in this case, parking lot operators. The parking lot operators, who, by the way, are perfectly within their legal rights to lease their property to whoever they choose, including the United States federal government. This is what sanctuary city politics looks like up close, folks. It is not some passive policy where the city just doesn't ask questions. It is an active, aggressive, coordinated campaign to frustrate and obstruct and ultimately defeat federal law enforcement. And the people doing it are elected officials who swore an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, which, last I checked, makes federal law supreme. Maybe they missed that day in civics class. Maybe they went to schools where civics got replaced with something called social emotional learning, and they never got around to the supremacy clause. I don't know. What I do know is this. The Trump administration's response has been, shall we say, proportionate. They are now preparing the largest mass visa revocation in the history of this country. Up to 200,000 foreigners who are here on business and tourism visas, but who have simultaneously filed for asylum, which is not what those visas are for, folks. That's called visa fraud. That's illegal. They're about to have those visas pulled. 200,000 at once. The Washington Times is reporting this, and officials say it would likely result in many of these individuals being required to leave the country. Yeah, that tends to happen when you're here illegally. You have to leave. Remarkable how that works. Now, the drive-by media is already gearing up to portray this as some sort of heartless, cruel, unprecedented crackdown on innocent people. Let me translate what's actually happening for those of you in Rio Linda. These are individuals who came to this country on a tourist visa or a business visa, visas that say, essentially, you're here temporarily for a specific, limited purpose, and then immediately turned around and filed asylum claims, using the visa as a parking spot while they run out the clock on the immigration court system, which is backlogged, by the way, by years. The wait time to get an asylum case heard can be 5, 6, 7 years. So you get a tourist visa, you file for asylum, and suddenly you've got a legal hook that lets you stay here for the better part of a decade while the courts sort it out. It is a systematic, organized exploitation of an already overloaded system. And before somebody fires off an angry email, yes, there are real asylum seekers. Yes, there are people fleeing genuine danger. But the system as it exists right now cannot distinguish between them and the people gaming it. And the people gaming it have made it nearly impossible for the genuine cases to be heard in anything resembling a timely fashion. Trump is trying to fix that by enforcing the law as it is written. Now, you'll notice something. The mayor of Boston is out there hunting down parking lot owners. The administration is revoking 200,000 visas. And the question the media is asking is, isn't the administration being too harsh? Aren't they going too far? What about due process? What about compassion? Nobody is asking the mayor of Boston why she thinks it's appropriate to pressure private citizens not to cooperate with federal law enforcement. Nobody. Not one reporter camped outside City Hall. Not one tough question on CNN. There's a word for that. A couple of them, actually. I've been using them for years. Drive-by media, lamestream media. They show up, they create a narrative, they fire it into the bloodstream, and they're gone. Off to the next story. Never accountable, never corrected, never embarrassed by how wrong they were the last time. And here's the larger point, and I want you to hold on to this because it matters. What is happening in Boston, what's happening in sanctuary cities all across this country is not about compassion for immigrants. I want to be very clear about that. It is about power. It is about Democratic machine politicians who have built their electoral coalitions on communities that benefit from lax immigration enforcement. And they will do anything to protect that arrangement. The immigrants are not the cause. They are the instrument. The people who actually care about immigrants, who actually want to improve their lives, are the ones arguing for a legal, orderly, functional immigration system. The ones who want the current chaos to continue are the ones with something to gain from it. I know that sounds harsh, but my friends, we have been told for 30 years that pointing this out is cruel and racist and nativist. And in that time, the border situation has gone from bad to catastrophic to something that requires the largest visa revocation in American history just to begin addressing it. I think the people who told us we weren't allowed to say these things owe us an apology. Don't hold your breath. Now, I promised you I'd get to Abdul El-Sayed, the Democratic Senate nominee in Michigan. And folks, this man is a gift. He is an absolute gift. He went on Jesse Waters' program. And by the way, good for Jesse for pressing him. And they asked him about Sharia law, about a past statement he made that was, let's say, eyebrow-raising about America's opposition to Sharia. And El-Sayed, and I want to make sure I get this right, compared Sharia law to Catholic canon law. Canon law, as if these are equivalent things, as if one is not the legal and governmental code of a theocratic political system and the other is internal church governance for Catholics. Now, I'm not going to sit here and give you a dissertation on comparative religious law. But I will say this, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops does not have anybody's hand cut off. I think that's a relevant distinction. And then they asked him about reparations. And El Sayed said, we need to have an honest conversation about the incredible debt that was put upon black folks that we have yet to pay. Now, the left has been making this argument for years, and I want to address it seriously for a moment because it deserves a serious answer. The serious answer is, who exactly is paying whom for what to settle a debt incurred by people who have been dead for 160 years? There is not a slave owner alive in this country. There is not a slave alive in this country. The people being asked to pay had nothing to do with slavery, and the people who would receive the money did not experience slavery. What this is, stripped of all the moral dressing, is a government wealth transfer program justified by racial identity. That is what it is, and El Sayed is for it. Then they asked him about sex changes for minors, and he invoked, I'm not making this up, the Right to Try Act. The Right to Try Act, which was passed to allow terminally ill patients access to experimental treatments that hadn't cleared the full FDA approval process. And he used that as his philosophical framework for why the government shouldn't restrict gender surgeries on children. My friends, the Right to Try Act was about dying cancer patients, not about 12-year-olds. But in the El Sayed worldview, those are the same thing. And there's a Smithsonian affiliate museum in Dearborn, which is El Sayed's political backyard, that has exhibits arguing Arabs were treated unfairly after September 11th. Your Smithsonian, your tax dollars, arguing that the real victims of September 11th were not the 3,000 Americans who died, but the people who were looked at sideways at airports afterward. I am almost at a loss for words. Almost. I still have 2.5 hours in the tank. Don't worry. Michigan, I say this to you as a friend. You have a choice. You can send this man to the United States Senate, or you can send someone who doesn't think our post-9/11 response was a war crime and that reparations are just a polite overdue invoice. Your call. The all-knowing, all-sensing Maha Ricky has weighed in. All right, folks, let's run through a few more things that are happening out there on this fine Monday in late August, and there is no shortage of material today, I assure you. First up, California and water. Now, this is actually important, and I want you to pay attention because this affects you, even if you've never set foot in California and have no intention of doing so. A key House Republican is warning that Gavin Newsom, and I've been calling him the beautifully coiffed empty suit, and I stand by that, has so badly mismanaged California's water infrastructure that it could threaten food supplies across the entire country. Not just California, the whole country, because in case you've forgotten, the Central Valley of California grows an enormous share of America's fruits and vegetables. Almonds, grapes, tomatoes, strawberries, pistachios. If you ate a salad this week, there's a reasonable chance California grew part of it. And the Colorado River, which supplies water to California and 6 other states, is being strained. Not because of drought alone, though drought is a factor, but because California has refused for decades to build the water infrastructure that would allow them to capture and store water when it's abundant. No new dams, no new reservoirs, not in decades. Why? Because the environmental wackos decided that dams are bad. Dams disrupt ecosystems. Dams are man interfering with nature. So California sat there, letting the water flow out to sea every wet winter, unable to store it, and then wondering why there's a water shortage every dry summer. It's like being on a diet where you throw away all the food when it's available and then complain you're hungry. And Newsom, who wants to be president, let's be honest about what this is all about, has presided over this failure while simultaneously lecturing the rest of the country about how California is the model for the future. The model for the future, California, where the water doesn't work, the power grid nearly collapses every August, and people are leaving faster than you can count them. Don't let him bring that model to Washington. That's all I'm saying. Now, the CDC, and this is a fun one, the CDC has put data back on its website showing that defensive gun uses in this country happen upwards of 2.5 million times per year. 2.5 million. That's the CDC, not the NRA, not some gun lobby outfit operating out of a strip mall in Virginia. The Centers for Disease Control, the same agency the left has been treating as holy scripture for the last several years. When the CDC says get vaccinated, it's science, and you are a denier if you question it. When the CDC says 2.5 million Americans use firearms defensively every year, crickets. Suddenly the CDC is not so authoritative anymore. This data had been removed from the CDC's website. It's back up now, and the number, 2.5 million defensive uses per year, is on the high end of what researchers estimate. But even the low-end estimates are around 1 million. 1 million times a year, a law-abiding American uses a firearm to protect themselves or someone else. Now, the gun control crowd will tell you, they always tell you, that guns make you less safe, that having a gun in your home makes you a danger to yourself and your family. That the answer to violence is fewer guns. And yet here is the government's own data suggesting that firearms are being used to prevent violence at a rate of millions of times annually. They don't want you to think about that. They really don't, because it disrupts the entire narrative. If guns protect people, then the argument for confiscating them becomes a lot harder to make. You know why there's a Second Amendment, folks? In case the government fails to follow the first one. And sometimes, often, in the middle of the night, in a dark neighborhood, when no police officer can arrive in time, the Second Amendment is the only thing standing between a law-abiding citizen and catastrophe. 2.5 million times a year. Don't doubt me. Finally, and I want to end the roundup on this because it's RFK Jr., and he's always good for an interesting few minutes. The Health and Human Services Secretary went on television and said that we have been, quote, mass poisoning children with ultra-processed foods. And he's talking about school lunches. The Trump administration wants to get the garbage out of school cafeterias. Now, here's where I have to be honest with you folks. I do not agree with RFK Jr. on a lot of things. The man has been on the wrong side of issues I care deeply about for most of his career. But on this one, he's not wrong. Have you looked at what gets served to kids in public school cafeterias? The chicken nuggets, the rectangular pizza, the sugary milk, the corn syrup, everything. We wouldn't eat that. We wouldn't feed that to a guest. And we have been shoveling it into children for 50 years and then being shocked that we have a childhood obesity epidemic. The government got involved in school nutrition and made it worse. That's the punchline. The government decided what kids should eat. The food companies lobbied their way into the guidelines, and the result is a generation of kids who are metabolically worse off than their grandparents who ate butter and red meat and never went to a gym. The solution is simple. Real food. Not complicated, not expensive, not ideological. Real food. I'll argue with RFK about vaccines another day. Today, on the chicken nuggets, we are in agreement. My My friends, we have covered a lot of ground today, and I hope you've enjoyed the ride as much as I have, because I will tell you, I am having more fun than a human being should be allowed to have. Here's what I want to leave you with, because everything we talked about today, Boston's mayor hunting down property owners, the visa revocations, El Sayed and his Sharia canon law equivalence and his reparations tab, and his museum that puts America on trial for defending itself, all of it comes from the same place. There is a contingent in this country that fundamentally does not like America as it was founded, does not like its history, does not like its laws, does not like its borders, does not like its people making their own decisions. And rather than argue for changing those things through legitimate democratic means, they work around them. They pressure parking lot owners. They file for asylum on tourist visas. They build museums with Smithsonian branding to rewrite the story of September 11th. They run Senate candidates who think the response to 3,000 dead Americans was the problem, not the attack. And they count on the drive-by media to normalize all of it. But here's the thing about the American people. They are, as I have said for 30 years, the adults in the room. They see through it. It takes time. It takes a few election cycles sometimes, but they see through it. The Trump administration revoking 200,000 visas is not cruelty. It is the bare minimum function of a sovereign nation. A nation that cannot or will not enforce its own immigration laws is not a nation in any meaningful sense. It is a suggestion. And America is not a suggestion. Hold the line, folks. Encourage people around you to pay attention, not to the drive-by version of events, to what's actually happening. And remember, the people working hardest to convince you that common sense is dangerous are the people most threatened by it. I'm Rick LeBeau. This has been Rush Hour. Same time tomorrow if they let us back on.